Mr. Mags here. Today, I'll be asking the question, what if every Pokemon region had a brand new Elite Four? Now, a few videos back, I made a video where I went over every single current Pokemon League and ranked all of the groups of Elite Four members to determine which one I believe was the best. I really enjoyed making that video, and it kind of got me thinking about what I personally would do if I had the opportunity to make a brand new league in every single region. So that will be my video today. So let's jump right into the criteria for how I develop these teams. First, there will be no overlapping types with any Elite Four members within any given region. So even if I feel there is a certain Elite Four member that could definitely use an overhaul, like Will over in Johto, I won't be able to use a Psychic Elite Four member for my Johto League. But any other type outside of, in that case, Psychic, Poison, Fighting, Dark, all the other types are valid for that region in question. Kind of going off that, this is assumed to take place after a time skip where the player character is the champion and the current Elite Four members are replaced. So, so that's just kind of a lore reason why the entire Elite Four has been, completely restructured. Although that being said, I did kind of have the idea that when applicable, the the character will be replaced by actual characters from those games. So, for example, if I decided that it would make sense for a Rock Elite Four member to exist in Kanto, I would say is actually Brock who filled that spot. There will be a certain times when the type just didn't quite work out to have a type specialist in the region already, so it went to like an ace trainer or some other relevant trainer class, that kind of thing. But when possible, I tried to give it to a character that already existed in those games. Now, that being said, I wasn't gonna like pigeonhole that character into the exact team or exact ace that they originally used. Going back to the Brock example, I'm not gonna force him to have his Onyx as his ace. I think that would be a little, a little underwhelming for an Elite Four member, but it might be on his team. But I wouldn't force him to have Onyx as his ace. So I focused more on making the team and then added the relevant character after, if that makes sense. Kind of going off that once again. Um, all Pokemon are fair game. So, for example, if I think it makes sense for a flying Elite Four member to exist in Kanto, I don't see why he wouldn't use the strongest flying type of the region, which would be Dragonite, even though that is Lance's ace, because Lance is no longer in the Pokemon League at all. A new flying Elite Four member is now in his position. I don't see why he wouldn't be able to use Dragonite and whatever other Pokemon, are relevant to him. This does mean that there will be a couple of times when situations like that happen where, you know, the it just makes sense to use overlapping aces within a region. It didn't happen super often, but there is a couple of times when it did happen. But I tried to avoid it where possible, but there's just a couple of times when it was just I personally felt it was unavoidable. But yeah, I'm not gonna, say they can't use a Pokemon just because a character already used it, which is why I specifically said this exists in a time when, they're in a situation where there will not be overlapping with existing trainers, at least in the same Elite Four. I'll be using the version of the region with the most options, including DLC areas. So on top of using Platinum for Sinnoh and Black and White 2 for Unova, I'll also allow Galar and Paldea to use Pokemon that are introduced or findable in their DLCs as well. I just think that especially with this time skip, you have all available Pokemon at your disposal. I just think that made for a little more interesting list. And one little side quest that I wanted to go on throughout this, it wasn't a necessity, but it was just something that I wanted to try was to have at least one member of every single type. There's actually a number of types that have never been Elite Four at this point. I can think of grass, I can think of electric and normal. There might be others, but I know of at least those three. So because we had 8 generations worth of Elite Four members, minus Galar, since it didn't actually have an Elite Four, but you know, 8 different regions that had Elite Four members, and none of them were specialized in electric, grass, or normal. I think that's kind of crazy. So I thought it'd be fun to at least try to have one of every single member of every single type. So, all right. So let's jump right into the league I developed in Kanto, starting off with Poison. Poison was a type that I think it has just a lot of really strong Pokemon. However, most of those Pokemon are used in a lot of other places, so it just didn't really, it didn't really make sense for it to be an Elite Four member in the original games, especially since Koga was a gym leader. But even then, I feel like his gym could have, definitely used an overall, considering he only used 2 lines of Pokemon in Red and Blue. So I wanted to give the type justice in Kanto by giving Koga here Weezing, Tentacruel, Victory Bell, Venomoth, and Nidoking. I actually quite like his team from the Johto games. That also was kind of an inspiration to just, essentially just have him take this position in, quote unquote, in Kanto. So yeah, I really like it when a major trainer like this is able to have all of his Pokemon have different secondary types. Weezing having, no secondary type, Tentacruel being part water, Victreebel being part grass, Venomoth being part bug, and then Nidoking being part ground. An early version of this team had Nidoking and Nidoqueen kind of as dual aces, similar to Lorelei's Jinx and Lapras. How they are both her aces in the Gen 1 and Gen 3 versions of that team. But I decided for the sake of having them all have different secondary types, I went with Venomoth instead. And I really like the idea of this team because it just kind of works so well together, covering pretty much every single thing you can throw at a poison team. Weezing is really good defensively. Tentacruel is really good special defensively. Tentacruel and Victory Bell are both great into ground types. Venomoth, assuming it can survive at least one hit, can use bug moves into other psychic types. And then Nidoking, I feel, is just a very strong, very imposing Pokemon to have as an ace. So yeah, I think this worked very well overall as a first Elite Four member in Kanto. Now for water, uh, I water has been one of those types, especially in Kanto, that I've always been just a little not annoyed at, but just feel like it was always a missed opportunity for that type to be so early into the game as a gym leader, considering there are so many water types available to the point that Lorelei was functionally a water Elite Four member. If she had something instead of Jinx, she would have basically been a water Elite Four member. So I decided to double down and have her actually be a water Elite Four member. So here, Misty will have Poliwrath, Seadra, Slowbro, Lapras, and Gyarados. I didn't want to have too much overlap with Lorelei. Original part of this team had a uh Dugong or Cloyster instead of Seadra, but A for type variety and also just not to overlap too much with Lorelei. Like I said, I tried not to take them too much into account. Clearly, she's using Lapras, even though Lapras was the ace of Lorelei, but I still don't want it to be too repetitive, especially since there are so many water types available in this game. Um, yeah. Gyarados is a Pokemon that I feel just deserve to be the ace of somebody's team in Kanto when it just kind of never is. And then once again, I just really like the type variety that this team presents here. Next up, we have Sabrina here rocking the Psychic type as the third member with Mr. Mime, Jinx, Starmie, Exeggutor, Alakazam. If this were Kanto, like the Gen 1 Kanto, I kind of understand why they didn't have Psychic be an Elite Four member because Psychic is kind of busted back then. There wasn't a lot to really hit it hard. It was actually immune to Ghost. There was like two bug moves and neither of them were any good. Maybe three, and they weren't still none of them were any good really. They're all super fast, and the ones that aren't like the Exeggutor is super tanky. It would have just been a problem to take down. But in an updated version of like in a time skip version of the Let's Go games, for example, where there are a lot more dark moves, there are a lot better bug moves, just it now actually be able to hit by Shadow Punch and Shadow Ball and that kind of thing. I think this would be more manageable. But even in a modern version of Kanto, I still think this will be a very formidable team. Once again, I like the type variety here with Mr. Mime now being part fairy. All of them now have different secondary types. And then Alakazam, even to this day, is still pretty darn powerful. It Yeah, it's kind of frail, but it has incredibly high special attack and really good speed. So yeah, it's frail, but there's a chance you're never going to be able to actually hit it, especially in Kanto, where uh, the only dark types available are ones that you might be able to get if you trade for a Alolan variant of Raticate or something, but you can't really bank on that in a given playthrough. So I think this could would just be a very big roadblock for a lot of people. However, I do think there is one type that just works even better as a last Elite Four member in this region, that being the normal type. And there wasn't a normal specialist. At one point, I kind of considered having it be basically like Giovanni, but that didn't quite work out. So I just had this Ace Trainer character here, uh, be it with Kangaskhan, Wigglytuff, Dodrio, Tauros, Snorlax. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot you could do with as far as like type variety with normal types in this region. There was one point where I considered making it up all mono normal, just to lean more into the fact that there's not a lot of variety. But because Wigglytuff and Dodrio are, in modern Pokemon games uh, do have these secondary types, and both those secondary types are great into fighting. I think it only makes sense for them both to be here. I know Wigglytuff isn't the strongest Pokemon, but it has pretty good HP. It has access to fairy moves, so I think this would be a very overall very powerful team, especially when Kangaskhan, Tauros, and Snorlax all are only weak to fighting moves, and Snorlax is an absolute tank of a Pokemon. Like if I assume it would know rest and maybe snore, sleep talk or something. So like even if you are able to whittle it down, it can just get all the way back up and still whittle you down while it's asleep. So and then Tauros is also really fast and strong. Like I just think this makes for a very formidable last Elite Four member. I don't think it's as good as Lance just by nature of him having a pseudo legendary, and Snorlax is good, but it's not Dragonite. But I still think this is about as good as you can do without actually being Lance. All right, and just like with that previous video where I analyze all the Elite Four members, at the end of every region here, I am going to be presenting them all the aces as a group here, just to kind of show my work and be like this is the essence of what that region is giving you. And I personally think Nidoking, Gyarados, Alakazam, Snorlax is a very competent group of aces. Arguably, Nidoking is a little underwhelming compared to the other three here. Just is not quite as fast, doesn't quite hit as hard. But it's the first member, but also I really like Nidoking, but also it has a lot of different moves it can use. It has a lot of different strategies it can do. So I do think it is good enough to warrant Elite Four member ace status. Even if it wasn't like the best ever, the other three absolutely make up for it. So I think this is an overall pretty solid group. All right, moving on to Johto, which in that video I said was, I believe, the third worst Elite Four ace group out of all of Pokemon, and I still stand by Will being possibly the single worst team in all of Pokemon, or at least one of my least favorite teams in all of Pokemon. So I had a lot of fun with figuring out what I would personally do to make this league specifically better. And this first one here, I'm very proud of. So the first one here is Rock. Now, at one point this was going to be a little like this was going to be a little different, be a little higher up and have Brock be the character, and have Golem and maybe the fossils as well, but then I decided to scale it back slightly and have it be more of a joke team, but still something that could be pretty formidable with Sudowoodo, Corsola, Shuckle, Magcargo, and Tyranitar. Now, I just love the idea of this random youngster kid rocking up to the Elite Four and being able to just have this Tyranitar absolutely carry this otherwise kind of underwhelming team. That's just something I really like about the Johto region, is that there's a lot of weird little guys just around the region that you would never really use on your team otherwise, like unless you just either want to challenge or just, or you just like them so much you want to use them on your team. I feel like you wouldn't really want to have Corsola. Even Sudowoodo to an extent can't I feel kind of falls off after the mid game. Akariga evolves too late to be useful, and Shuckle can't really hurt at all. Like the Shuckle would really only be there to chip you down with Toxic and Sandstorm and maybe Wrap and that kind of thing. So the rest of the team is kind of, I would say, on the weaker side, within Tyranitar being the pseudo legendary of the region, just coming out last and potentially messing up the rest of your team. Because up to that point, maybe you are worn down a little bit by potential stealth rocks and other like Sandstorm and other shenanigans these people can do, but they're not really gonna put that big of a dent in you. But then this Tyranitar could just come in and sweep sweep out the remains. So I think this is very fun. So yeah, I maybe it would be a better team if it were Brock with the fossils and a golem, but I personally like this more. I think it represents the region as a whole a little better. Next up, Electric. We do have a Kanto gym leader coming over with Lieutenant Surge here. And this region didn't have that many new fully evolved electric types. I believe the only new ones were Lantern and Ampharos. There were a good amount of Pokemon that are Kanto Pokemon that are associated with Johto Pokemon or vice versa. So I still think it makes sense for him to have Raichu, who evolves from Pichu, Electabuzz, who evolves from Elekid, and then Jolteon, I think, makes sense since this game introduced two new evolutions. I still feel like there is a reasonable enough connection there to justify it being here. Not that there were many other choices. Like the only other real choice was Magneton because it now got the steel type, but I'm saving that for just a little bit later. So I think Jolteon fits here. And then Lantern being the only not pure electric type just because wasn't really any other option there, but it does work since Lantern can hit ground type super effectively and can also learn ice moves to hit grass types, which the type otherwise has somewhat issue with. And then Ampharos, I think, is a pretty solid Pokemon to go on the second Elite Four member here. Next, we have Jasmine for a Steel type third member with Fortress, Skarmory, there's the Magneton, Steelix, and Scizor. I kind of jump back and forth between whether Steelix or Scizor would be the ace. They both have similar base up total. Scizor has 500, Steelix, I believe, has 510. Steelix is definitely way more defensive, but Scizor only has the one weakness. It hits a lot harder. I think it's slightly faster. So I just felt as an ace, Scizor just overall works better as an ace. It is a little unfortunate that it has an overlapping typing with another Pokemon on our team, but since they both only have that one weakness, I think it's fine. And yeah, I think this is really cool. I have always been on the opinion that both Steel and Dark should have both been Elite Four members in Johto. Um, like I don't know. I just like the idea of both of the new types having proper representation as these strong new types in the region. But you know, I'm okay with Jasmine being the sixth or seventh, depending on how you count gym leader. Just you know, her team is also one that I've never liked with the two Magnemite when one of them easily could have been Magaton and then no Skarmory. So I think this team is finally doing her proper justice. And next up is one that, like, I had this idea at first, and I was like, let me just try, see if I can think of something else. And it just nothing ever really came together better. And I honestly really like this idea, especially since it kind of mirrors something that did happen in the original version of Kanto into Johto. That being Misty coming back as the fourth Elite Four member with a new water team. Kind of similar to how Bruno moved from second to third and Lance moved from the fourth member up to champion. Misty moved from the second member up to the final member. And I just think that really works. There's a lot of fun new water types in the region. Um, So yeah, I just really think it's cool to have this team kind of mirror the team she had in the Kanto team I created. Politoed to mirror the Poliwrath that I gave her. Quagsire doesn't mirror anything, but I still think it's a fun Pokemon for her to have that electric immunity and then also be good against electric types. Slow King to mirror the Slow Bro on the original team. And I'm keeping the Gyarados just because Lake of Rage is such an important part of the region. It was her ace from the previous team, and I just feel like it makes sense to keep it here. If you have issue with her keeping Gyarados, I completely understand. You can switch that out for either Mantine or Quillfish. I think either work well, especially to help out with the grass type weakness that the rest of the team has. So I could give or take Gyarados, but just essentially if it were switched out for Mantine or Quillfish, I think this team would overall work better as the third, and then have Jasmine be the fourth. But regardless, I think Kingdra works very well as the ace of either the third, but also works very well as the fourth member, just because it only has the one weakness, kind of two, and with Fairy. But back in any version of Johto that currently exists, it's only weak to Dragon. Uh, it's deceptively bulky. It hits super hard. It's especially with its Swift Swim ability, it can move really fast. Like I just think Kingdra works very well as the ace of a fourth member here. But I think it could also work as as a third one as well. Um, but just something about seeing Gyarados and Kingdra next to each other here, even though the rest of her team is a little dopey, I think it works for Misty here to as a as the fourth Elite Four member in Johto. And that is part of the reason why I gave her Seadra back in Kanto. That could have been Kingler, that could have been Sea King, that could have been Dugong Cloister, like I said, but I don't know. I wanted to give a water type that was pure water, and since it evolved into Kingdra, I felt like that was a slam dunk. So here is the new group of aces for Johto. We have Tyranitar, Ampharos, Scizor, and Kingdra. I think that's awesome. That is so much better than Xatu, Crobat, Machamp, Houndoom. Like, like I said before, on paper, Crobat, Machamp, Houndoom isn't the worst. It just didn't live up to the full potential that I personally feel that Johto could produce, especially with Xatu very much so bringing down the average there. So I think this is just a significantly better group of Pokemon for Johto. Now, moving over to Hoenn, I was kind of balanced, like jumping between like six or seven different types to go off of, and I wasn't sure if I should give them megas since since Hoenn does exist in Generation 6 where uh a version of Hoenn does exist in Generation 6 where megas existed, but like or should I focus more on the classic version of the games that like since I did have seven different types available, I'm like, you know what, if I can find one more type that I can make a confident team with, then I'll basically branch it into two and have one that's for Generation 3 and one for Generation 6. And I was able to do that, so you're actually getting two different teams for Hoenn. This first one here being for the Generation 3 games. Starting off with Brawly as the fighting Elite Four member who was first. We have Breloom, Heracross, Machamp, Medicham, Hariyama. Now, as much as it pains me to have Machamp here, I'm personally not a fan of just throwing Machamp or anyone from the Machamp line in onto any given fighting uh, fighting character because almost every single fighting specialist uses Machamp at some point. I don't know why. There's a good amount of other fighting types that could use, but almost all of them use Machamp. But unfortunately, in this instance, those are all the fighting types that aren't starter Pokemon. So that's what I had to use. But regardless, I think Hariyama is still a pretty solid first member here. He has pretty solid bulk. He hits really hard. Like both thick, fat, and guts are both pretty good abilities. So I think it works. It works very well as a first ace. Next, we have a ground Elite Four member here. And if you want to headcanon this as being Vito Winstraight, that's kind of what I'm doing since I did make him this cool trainer character here. I know Vito never technically used any ground type Pokemon, but he could adapt. His grandma, I think, used a Numel, or someone else in the Winstray family used a Numel. Like, I think he could make it work, especially since the rest of the team is, or the rest of the family, are housed just south of the desert area where some of these Pokemon will be found anyway. I think it could be fun. So, let's say Vito Winstray here actually made it out of Victory Road and to the Elite Four and was able to make himself a member with Whiscash, Camerupt, Donphan, Claydol, Flygon. I like the type variety. I I think Flygon is a Pokemon that it works on Drake's team as it is, but I think it also one that definitely works very well as an ace of an Elite Four member. So yeah, I think this makes for a very, very solid team. Next up, Roxanne as the third member. And something kind of fun is that I like there's something kind of fun when you have storytelling like this where the fighting member was first, and then you have ground, and then you have rock. Even though rock should be weak to both ground and fighting, it's actually above both of them. And something kind of similar actually does happen in Hoenn, where you have a dark gym leader who's really form member who's first, and then you have Ghost, which Dark should be good into, but Ghost is still above it. And then you have Ice, and then Dragon, which Ice should absolutely beat, yet Dragon's above it. So yeah, I just kind of like when you have that subtle storytelling of like, yes, I should be weak to you, but I'm still better. So, and also kind of fun in the lore, the person that is historically considered the first gym leader, Roxanne, is actually able to get two rungs above the person that is historically the second member or the second gym leader. So I think that's fun. Um, so yeah, her team here is Lunatone, Cradily, Armaldo, Relicanth, Aggron. Aggron is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. I knew I had to make one of the Hoenn Leaf members here either rock or steel in order to use Aggron. So I think it works here. At one point, I had Nose Pass instead of Lunatone and had her be the second, but in most cases, I didn't care too much about having pairs not be paired up. I already did that with Nidoking without Nidoqueen, so I wasn't too worried about having Lunatone without Solrock. So since Lunatone is just so much better than Nose Pass, I put Lunatone here. Like I said in the criteria, I wasn't like super set on each character having to have their typical ace. If this were in if this team were made um for the Gen 6 games, she would have Probopass instead of Lunatone, but that's not how this fell. So Lunatone. And lastly, we have Norman as the fourth Elite Four member. Like, I didn't want necessarily to have normal be the ace, to be the last one twice. I already had like I don't know, I already had normal be the last one of the Kanto, but slacking is just so strong. Yes, it can only hit every other turn, but the turns it does hit, it is so unbelievably strong. It just had to be the last one here. Plus, it also kind of still works with the theming here, where the first one is fighting, and then the third one is rock, which are two types that normal typically should struggle with. But Norman is just so good that he was able to come out on top here with the team of Zangoose, Swellow, Girafarig, Exploud, Slacking. Just like with the other team, normal didn't have a lot of options outside of pure normal types. I actually had to pull in Giraffe because I didn't really feel confident having Spinda or Noon, or especially not Delcatty, who are actually Hoenn Pokemon, but I don't think they worked as Elite Four member Pokemon. Whereas Girafarig, with that secondary typing to help with the fighting threat along with Swellow, I think that just overall works better. And then uh yeah, Zangoose, Explode, and Slacking are just the Zangoose and Explode are two of my favorite Pokemon from Hoenn, and there's a lot of Pokemon that are fighting for that spot. So yeah, I think they absolutely deserve to be here, and then Slacking absolutely deserves to be the the ace of the fourth member here. It actually has a higher base stat total than even flat than Salamence. Functionally, it's his attack is cut in half since he can only attack every other turn, kind of. But like I said, the turns he can attack, if he's able to use Hyper Beam in the original Gen 3 games, where Hyper Beam is the physical move, he's recharging the next turn anyway. I just think if you can't take him down super fast, or if you don't know about the strat to like either use dig or use protect every other turn, this might, this might be a roadblock for you. So here we go with Hariyama, Flygon, Aggron, Slacking. Maybe I'm just biased, but I think Hoenn just has a lot of Pokemon that just look like they deserve to be the, to be here. And I think this is a very, very good group of aces, especially, since I like Aggron and Flygon so much. I think this is just an overall very solid group. But we also have a group from Generation 6. And this might be, again, just me being biased, but I really like the Gen 3 starters. I think they're just so cool. And since all three were given Mega Evolutions, I did end up just kind of making teams surrounding the Gen 3 starters for this. So starting off with Flannery for the fire member here, with Camerupt, Magcargo, Ninetales, Torkoal, Mega Blaziken. I like Blaziken. Originally, I was gonna have Blaziken be on the fighting one, and then that kind of branched off into two different teams here. But um, yeah, this will be especially be good one gen later when Ninetales. Actually, Ninetales could have its hidden ability, but if Torkoal could just have his regular drought ability, that'll be even better. But we can just say, I personally think it's fine if Elite Four members especially have access to hidden abilities. So yeah, that Ninetales can absolutely set up drought. So yeah, I think this is very good. The team overall, I think this is definitely a very solid first Elite Four member. The team has solid enough output, but it's overall pretty slow. Ninetales is kind of fast. Blaziken can get faster with the speed boost, but Magcargo, Torkoal, and Camerupt are all abysmally slow. Magcargo and Camerupt are both quad weak to water. Magcargo is quad weak to ground as well. And Torkoal was really good as the ace of a fourth gem, but by this point, it's more average, I would say. But I think as a first Elite Four member, it works. And next up, keeping the trend I had with the other Hoenn team or Hoenn League, where I kind of had a theme of ones that are, of like the next one being weak to the one before it. I have grass be the second one. So even though fighters should be great against grass, I think it'd be cool if we have once again Vito Winst right here, who actually has used grass Pokemon before, just rocking up and absolutely obliterating Flannery to take that second spot. So he has Breloom, Shiftry, Ludicolo, Roserade, since we are using the Gen 6 Pokedex, and Mega Sceptile. Yeah, at one point I had this as third, but because I do like the theming of it going fire, grass, water, I had this plus the water one I did make was I think deserving of third. But yeah, I just think this is just a very, very good team, and I've always said it's a shame that there wasn't a grass specialist anywhere in Hoenn. There's a lot of really, really good grass types. And I've made a Grass Elite Four member before in a previous video, so I want to do something a little different and have Mega Sceptile be the ace here, along with now having access to Roserade. I just think this makes for an excellent team. Like I said, the next up is Water, and I decided to have Juan be the character chosen here. Um, I know he doesn't technically exist in Omega Ruby FS Sapphire, but I don't know. I just like the idea of one being here instead of Wallace. That's just I don't know. I just you could say, oh, after everything that happened with the Delta episode, Wallace kind of retired or just didn't actually want to step up and actually become champion. So Juan decided to kind of take that place and at least try to get as far as he could. And third member of Elite Four is still a very good spot with his Wailord, Crawdont, Azumarill, who evolved from Azumarill, who was a Gen 3 Pokemon, Walrein, and Mega Swampert. I really like this team. Um, like Azumarill now having that fairy typing means that there's no type overlap. Walrein was already the ace of the current third Elite Four member, so it works well on this team. Crawdont could have been a couple of different things. It could have been Relicanth. It could have been Milotic, but I don't know. I just didn't feel on a third Elite Four member team. I just didn't feel like Milotic. I feel like that would have pushed it over to the top, and I didn't want to do that. I felt good about this being the third member. And then Mega Swampert is just you. I know some people that don't like it, but I really like it. So I think it works as the ace here. But there is one more that I believe is an overall better team than the ones that actually had the starters. That being Wally here, actually ranking up with his Mega Gardevoir all the way up to the fourth member of the Elite Four, with this team of Grumpig, Solrock, Claydol, Medicham, and Mega Gardevoir. And once again, even though a good portion of his team is actually kind of weak to both water and grass, he's just has become so good as a trainer that he was able to surpass them and become the last member. At one point, I had Gallade instead of Medicham or Grumpig. I wasn't really sure, but in because I wanted to focus more on Gen 3 Pokemon where possible, and definitely in a rematch, he would absolutely have Gallade. But I I wanted him to have his Gardevoir from the original games, and um yeah, I don't know. Maybe I could definitely hear an argument for a Gallade somewhere here instead of one of the either Stalwart, Grumpig, or Medicham, but I don't know. I personally like Wally more with his Gardevoir. That's just my opinion, but yeah, I think it's not on paper. I feel like this team isn't as impressive um as one of the previous ones, especially the grass one. I think maybe the water one also. I think maybe on paper might feel a little more impressive, but that's also how gym leaders or how Elite Four members go sometimes. I feel like Lorelei's team is probably the most impressive of those four in Kanto, and she's first. So sometimes it just kind of works out this way where even though the team itself as a whole doesn't feel that impressive, it still can be super hard to take down. So yeah, I think this works. And the group of aces are the three starters and Mega Gardevoir. I feel like there's something very poetic about that. It's basically all of the ace Pokemon that the rivals from the Hoenn region can have. Yeah, I just kind of if kind of with Mega Gardevoir, but you get what I'm going with there. Next up, Sinnoh. This one was super hard to nail down. The teams I created, I feel are so unbelievably good that they could go in any order. It was kind of a meme when I was doing um, my series where I was making a new gym leader of every single type. Nearly every single type had the ammo to make a fourth gym leader. Almost all of them. Like almost all of them had ammo to make fourth had yeah, almost all of them had enough ammo to make eighth gym leaders that were almost too good to be gym leaders. Like I had I think upwards of was it, I think it was almost eight different teams that I was kind of like thinking between, and then I did narrow it down to the four that I ended up with here. And then I'm still not like exactly confident about the order that I put them in. I'm definitely confident about the teams themselves, but the order could kind of go any way. But I do think I liked what I landed on. So starting off, we have Fantina being the first ghost member here, with Spiritomb, Driftblim, Rotom, Miss Magius, and Dusknoir. I picked Rotom just because I feel like um after this theoretical time skip, I think we're kind of getting into that period where Rotom is now more accessible. In Gen 7 and up, Rotom is just kind of ubiquitous. It's just kind of in everybody's phones. It is the Pokedex now. They're found in trash cans and just kind of out in the wild as opposed to just this one static encounter. Static encounter in Sinnoh. So I think it makes perfect sense for her to have Rotom. Uh, if she were later on, maybe she would have Frostlass instead, but I'm saving that for a little later, but also I think Rotom can work. And then I was kind of going back and forth between Miss Magius and Dusknoir being her ace, but Dusknoir does have a little higher base set total. Miss Magius can probably technically hit a little harder and it's faster, but I think Dusknoir for me feels more like a feels more like an ace of an Elite Four member than Miss Magius does. But they both work very well. And then obviously, Spiritomb, outside of Fairy, has no weaknesses. And then Drifblim is just another very solid Pokemon to have as well. Next up, we have another one that's normal, and there wasn't a normal uh, specialist in the region. I considered Cheryl at one point, but considering the ace I gave her, I didn't really feel like super confident. So I decided just to go with this breeder character. Maybe I should have done Cheryl in the end, but whatever. So the team that this breeder has is Ambipom, Lopunny, Blissey, Licky Licky, and Porygon Z. Porygon Z is another one of those Pokemon that I am absolutely baffled wasn't on any major trainer teams throughout the main story of Platinum, especially. Like, I don't know, I feel like someone in Team Galactic should have used one. Your rival maybe could have used one. I feel like if they wanted to do an overhaul of the Elite Four for Platinum, I feel like this is something that easily could have been done. But oh well. I think Oregon Z, just because of how fast and strong it is, it absolutely works as an ace here. I also at one point had Snorlax instead of Lopunny, but I didn't want to have two different Pokemon that are fully evolved Pokemon of Gen 4 baby Pokemon. And since I didn't end up this being second, I think Lopunny works better in that slot. If this were fourth, it would definitely be Snorlax instead of Lopunny, but with it being second, I think Lopunny fits fine here. Next up, we have the flying member with this ace trainer character. Originally, I wanted to have it be the bird keeper, but I don't really like the bird keeper model in this read in these games. And also, there's only two actual birds. Because it's kind of a bird, but not really. So I think ace trainer overall fit this vibe better. So we have Staraptor, Yanmega, Gliscor, Honchkrow, and Togekiss. It is a crying shame that there is not a flying specialist in Sinnoh. There are so many amazing flying types. You also have Vespiquen, you also have Driftbloom from a previous team. There's even a couple of others I believe I can't think of right now, but there's so many good flying types that you can make. There's a lot of different permutations you can make while still having no overlapping secondary types. Yeah, like you can make one and have Honchkrow be the ace, Gliscor could be the ace. I could even argue Staraptor if it was like first or second could be the ace, but I think Togekiss, especially now in, later generations where Togekiss is now part fairy, Togekiss works so well as the ace of only four member. But I don't think it's quite as good as the ice one that I made here, with Candace being the final member, with Obama Snow to set up the snow. The Frostlass I didn't give to Fantina. If I did switch them around a little bit, I would have given Fantina Frostlass and her Glalie. I still like the idea of it being, of Pokemon, a Pokemon in its line or one that it's related to being introduced in this region. So I think it would have worked. And then Weavile, Glaceon, Mamoswine. This is just the team that she has in her rematch battle in Platinum, but these are all the best ice types in the region, so I don't see a reason not to give it to her. So yeah, I think Porygon Z, Togekiss, and Mamoswine, even Dusknoir, I could hear an argument for any of them being the final member, but yeah, as of right now, this is the group. In order, we have Dusknoir, Porygon Z, Togekiss, Mamoswine. I think this is a really, really solid group of aces. Like I've been on record saying that the the platinum group of aces was the third highest, second if you don't include Blueberry Academy, which I almost didn't. And this is really close to that group. It might even surpass it. Uh, but it's either it's like they're neck and neck, honestly. Like this region had just a lot of firepower for incredible ace Pokemon. So yeah. Unova. This one, I did something a little different with it. I decided to still keep the fact that you can fight them in any order. I don't like that they kept doing that in future games, but at least in this one instance where it's a new thing that they were experimenting with, I liked the concept, especially now that this game introduced two new ways of battle. So now you have four different ways of battle with single battle, double battle, triple battle, and rotation battle. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to create a new Elite Four where you have each member has a unique way of battling. So they're not in any specific order here. I assume they're all, if not the same level, around the same level. So yeah, let's just get right into the first team I made here. First one is Ground. You have Clay, who upgraded to Elite Four. And this is honestly something I kind of wish they had like actually done in Black and White 2. The fact that the Elite Four in Black and White 2 is nearly identical to Black and White. There's like two Pokemon across the entire league that's a little different. I never really liked that. I think given the 2 or 3 year time skip, you easily could have had one or two of the members be replaced by some other major trainer or just a new character, doesn't matter. Clay, I think, was absolutely right for the picking to take over, but he's stuck as a gym leader. It's whatever. But I think this team is really good, especially for a rotation battle. Starting off with Excadrill, Seismitoad, Golurk, Gliscor, and then Crocodile holding the ground gem, because I genuinely believe that if Game Freak had the idea to go all in on battle mechanics like Mega Evolution and stuff like that 1 gen earlier, they absolutely would have given every ace Pokemon the type boosting gems that were introduced in that region. So Crocodile's holding a ground gem. And I really like the grouping of Excadrill, Seismitoad, Golurk, because Excadrill would be up first with Seismitoad and Golurk on either side. So if you try to hit Excadrill with a water move, it would switch into Seismitoad. If you try to hit Excadrill with a fighting move, it could switch into Golurk. If you try to hit Golurk or Seismitoad with a grass move, you can switch back to Excadrill. And I feel those three, they would still take damage from most of those moves, but you could at least he could at least try to like predict what you're gonna do and react at least somewhat effectively. There's certain permutations, like if you're um actually yeah, if you're in Golurk, or if you're in with Golurk and try to use an ice move, you can go to Seismitoad or Excadrill and at least be neutral against it. So I really like the mind games that this could play on the player. And then Gliscor is just, yeah, a ground type that is in the Black and White 2 Pokedex that I think just fits the vibe that the rest of these Pokemon give. And then Crocodile is absolutely ace material. I will never understand why Grimsley has Bisharp as his ace. I mean, Crocodile is literally on his team. I think it fits him better. I think it worked better as an ace. So I know Excadrill is typically Clay's ace, and I think it still could work as an ace in the Elite Four, but I wanted this to be Crocodile's time to shine. Next up, the triple battle. We have Skyla stepping in with Braviary, Sigilyph, Altaria, Swanna, and Archeops, essentially using the flying gym as his like true intention to use it as like a super powered up version of acrobatics. So yeah, I really like the idea of it holding that flying gem. And I picked flying to represent triple battle since I'm pretty sure, if not all of them, at least the vast majority of flying moves can hit anyone on the field. So if Braviary is on her on her left side and you have Pokemon on your right side, it can still hit you with I believe pretty much any flying move. Same with Altaria's Dragon Pulse being able to hit anyone on your side too. So I think Altaria works well as one of her team. It could have been Mandibuzz, but I don't really like Mandibuzz all that much, and I feel like Altaria specifically being able to learn Dragon Pulse just helped emphasize the triple battle mechanics a little better. And I feel a little bad about not having Swanna on her team since that is her typical ace, and I'm not using it anywhere else. It wouldn't really be able to use Surf, I guess, but it could still, Scald or Hydro Pump or whatever. And then, yeah, Archeops is just such a good Pokemon most of the time. Like, obviously, if it's below half health, it won't really be able to do much of anything. But if it can get in relatively unscathed and then fire off that tactical nuke of a normal gym boosted acrobatics, then I hope you resist it because otherwise you might be screwed. Next up, we have Steel, represented here by Colress. After the headcanon here is that after Team Plasma crumbled for the final time, Colress was never like really like evil like that, so he kind of got reformed and was able to join the league. And this isn't the cleanest, especially not nearly as clean as the other two. I did make this one a double battle. Um, like I guess Bronzong can set up dual screens and maybe gravity if that could help or whatever, but this was more so just to complete the gimmick. I couldn't really think of a different type that would work better as a double battle, so this is about as the best that I could do personally. So we have Ferrothorn, Bronzong, Bisharp, Escavalier, and Kling being able to use Gear Grind boosted by that Steel Gym, which I have since learned making the Steel video that Gear Grind is actually boosted on both hits with that Steel Gem. So yeah, that would hit pretty hard. And once again, it's not the cleanest with why exactly it's a double battle, but if Bronzong can get up, either might be Trick Room actually. Now I'm thinking about it. I don't know why I didn't consider that before, but most of his team is actually very slow. So this Bronzong's whole job is to set up Reflect Light Screen and then Trick Room. That could at least get the majority of his team a pretty decent boost. Kling would maybe have to forego using Shift Gear, or maybe just kind of hope that by that point Trick Room is over. So yeah, I think with Bronzong here, it works pretty well. And lastly, this, like I said up top, these aren't in any particular order, but if they were in an order, this last one would go last regardless. This being a bug type one head up by Benga, Alder's grandson, who also has a Volcarona when you fight him anyway, so I think it makes sense for him to step in and actually be a bug specialist. With Crustle, Galvantula, Scolipede, Excelgor, and Volcarona. Yeah, this is it's very rare to find a region with enough bug types to make a good Elite Four member, especially a region with good enough bug to be the fourth member. So I feel like I had to save him for last, just to emphasize just how good this team overall would be. Crustle being able to take at least one hit with its sturdy ability and the setup shell smash to potentially outspeed and take out a good chunk of your team. Galvantula setting up sticky web, Scolipede and Excelgor being both pretty fast, especially Scolipede. I'm not really sure why it's that fast, and also being able to hit pretty hard, and then Volcarona being infamous for people thinking it's a legendary as it is. So you think it's one quiver dance up and you don't have any good rock types or anything to counter it. That's it. So yeah, this is and I think this is an A tier, if not S tier team, just in general. But yeah, I this is one of those honestly might be too good. Like it's very similar to a team that I gave Alder when I was kind of theory crafting him as a full-on bug specialist elite champion. But I, I still think it works very well as a member of the Elite Four. Um, which it makes it a little not like disappointing, I guess, but like I don't know, a little weird that I did make it that you can fight them in any order, so the impact of him being this strong won't be felt as much if you are able to fight him first, completely healthy. But I still think it works overall. And here's the group here. We have Crocodile, Archeops, Kling Clang, Volcarona. I will admit that Kling Clang feels maybe the most out of place amongst these four, but Kling Kling actually does have, I believe, 510 base stat total, which is close to the others. Crocodile is like 517 or something around there. So yeah, it still would definitely be able to hold its own. Next up, Kalos. And my number one priority with making these teams was correcting a huge mistake that the original Kalos League had, where none of them use Mega Evolutions. I'll never understand why. The only Mega Evolution you fight throughout the entire Kalos League is the champion's ace. I I don't know. I don't understand that, but what are you gonna do? So I decided to correct that by not making the Mega Evolution their ace, but having a Mega Evolution kind of be their pseudo ace of sorts. Starting off with Valerie being the fairy member here first, with Klefki, Sylveon, Carbink, Mega Gardevoir, and Florges. I could have gone Mega Mawile, but then that would be overlapping with Klefki. I guess Klefki could have been a previous gen Pokemon that turned fairy, like a Zoomer or Mr. Mime or something. Um, but you'll see just by the pedigree of the other members here, Mega Gardevoir isn't really like making her extremely overpowered, especially relative to the other members here. So yeah, Florges absolutely works as the ace of a Fairy Elite Four member, and then the rest of the team is gonna be pretty hard to take down. Klefki, Steel Fairy is one of the best typings in the game with his prankster ability. is able to mess you up with Thunder Wave and set up some entry hazards and stuff. Uh, Carbink with its durability, you can't take it down in one hit. So yeah, I think this is an overall very solid Elite Four member. Plus, I just like the idea of the new type that was introduced in this region being the first member of the league. Next up, flying. Now, this is the one that I was kind of hinting at where because of just the the relatively small size, actually not relatively, the really small size of the Kalos Pokedex, I did kind of have to double dip several different aces of other major characters in Kalos. Talonflame is another ace of an Elite Four member. Halucha is another ace of the gym leader. And then Noivern is actually the ace of the Dragon Elite Four member. So there weren't that many other flying types to work with, and I just felt like this was the type that worked the best as an Elite Four member. There weren't that many other types I was even considering, so this is what I went with. Talonflame, Vespiquen, Halucha, Mega Aerodactyl, and Noivern. With this Sky Battle trainer here being the character. It wouldn't be a Sky Battle, but just that's just the aesthetic that she rocks. Yeah, Noivern, although it is the current ace of an Elite Four member, I still think it's even more profound considering Noivern is one of the few Pokemon even now that is primarily flying. Up until that point, every single other flying type outside of kind of Tornadus, who is pure flying, was something flying type. Pidgey, normal flying for some reason. So Noivern actually, for some reason, even though I would argue it looks more draconic than anything else, it is flying dragon. So I think it's only fitting for it to be the ace of the flying Elite Four member. Next up, Ghost with this Hex Maniac here. With Trevenant, Golurk, Gourgeist, Mega Gengar, and Aegislash. Once again, I am using an ace of another Elite Four member, but Ghost just worked so well, I feel, and there weren't that many other types I was even considering, and Aegislash is a Ghost type, so I think this works. I'm a little annoyed that I had to double dip with the grass ghost types here. But what are you gonna do? And then yeah, Mega Gengar. If this were one earlier, it would have been Mega Bayonet. But yeah, I really like Mega Gengar. And then lastly, we have a Rock Elite Four member with Grant here leveling up into the position with Aurorus, Barbarical, who is actually, yeah, actually, funnily enough, across all of these teams, every single ace of the Callus Elite Four are actually all represented here. Talonflame, Noivern, Aegislash, Barbarical. Oh, I didn't like plan that, but that's kind of funny. Aurorus, Barbarical, Rhyperior, Mega Tyranitar, and then Tyrantrum. This team is kind of stacked. Like, I like the idea of Rhyperior being here since there's two other Pokemon who are also kind of shaped like that. Um, then Barbarical is also just looks kind of monstrous and weird. And then Ouroboros is another dinosaur. Like I, I don't know, I really like the team. I feel like it just really gives off last Elite Four member energy. Like maybe Aegislash is technically a stronger ace than Tyrantrum, but I think the rest of the team makes up for it. And here we go with the group of aces. We have Florges, Noivern, Aegislash, Tyrantrum. Yeah, again, I apologize if you feel like having two of the aces be identical to what they already are in the Kalos League, but unfortunately, the Kalos dex is the smallest dex we've ever gotten, and I didn't want all the aces to just be Mega Evolutions. That technically would have solved this, but then he wouldn't have had the Kalos representation I would have really wanted. So. it just kind of happened this way that Aegis slash and Noivern are two of the strongest Pokemon in the region, and they have a secondary type that I think worked. So there you go. Next up, Alola. This is another one that I was kind of flipping between like six or seven different types, and I'm happy with the ones I settled on, but it just kind of worked out for this four to be the best. But I was also considering Fairy. I was also considering Bug, but it it worked out to with what I ended up with. So the first member we have Sophocles stepping in as the Electric Elite Four member with Raichu, Oricorio, Alolan Golem, Togedemaru, and Vikavolt. Yeah, I think this is a very solid team. I like the the two different Alolan forms here. Vikavolt is unfortunately very slow, but if it can survive one hit, it has one of the strongest electric Z moves possible. Like I legitimately can't think of another electric type that has higher than 145 base special attack. Like I guess technically kind of Regieleki with transistor ability in Generation 8 before it was nerfed. Maybe that would be a little stronger if it had access to Z moves. But yeah, Vikavolt, I think, is maybe from memory the strongest. It's definitely the strongest non-legendary. And even then, I don't know any legendaries that have or that were electric type and have that high special attack. So yeah, just for that reason alone, I think Vikavolt had to be the ace. Except we have Poison, and I can never remember her name. It literally just left my brain, but Plumeria, something like that. Yeah. After Team Skull fell or disbanded or whatever, she turned over a new leaf and was able to become a Elite Four member. With Toxapex, Gengar, just because I like the idea of a Pokemon being represented with the type they're not often represented with. Gengar is almost exclusively seen as a ghost type. There are a couple of times where, like very, very few times where it's seen more as a poison type, but it's more often seen as a ghost type. So I like the idea of it being a poison type here. Garbodor, Alolan Golem, and Salazzle. Now, I believe Salazzle is actually the Pokemon throughout this entire presentation that is the ace of a member that I believe it is the one that has the lowest base stat total. I believe it's only 480. It is, I think, the only one that has below 500, but it has pretty solid speed. It has pretty good special attack. It would definitely be able to, as far as like new Catalyst Pokemon, it would be the one that'll be able to produce the strongest Poison Z move. So yeah, I at one point had a Alolan Muck be the ace, but its attack is a little lower than Salazzle's special attack. It is a little slower. It is only weak to one type with ground, and I maybe like the idea of an Alolan Pokemon, like an Alolan form being the ace in one of these, but I just think it works overall better for Salazzle to be the ace, even if it is technically on the weaker side. That's mainly just because its attack isn't like, super high. If it had 20 higher attack that it would never use anyway, you will be 500. And that's how a lot of these, more modern Pokemon especially, you know, they they have really high base stat totals, but a lot of it is in a stat they're not really using. So Lazzle has decent enough stats in the stat that it is using that I think it works fine enough as a, you know, first half Elite Four ace. Next up, we have Gladion here, who I think works as a normal Elite Four member with Komala, Toucannon, Oranguru, Beware, and Silvally. Now, ironically, um, this Silvally wouldn't actually be able to take advantage of the things Silvally typically does. Like Silvally's whole gimmick is that it holds these things called memories where it can change types just like Arceus can. But because he's the normal Elite Four member, it has to stay normal type. And I think that's fine. It's just a little funny that it can't use the gimmick that Silvally is typically known for. I guess it's not a huge deal since it's his ace and it would have to hold the normal Z move anyway. Which I mean, it's still technically a legendary Pokemon. I don't really agree with that distinction, but it's that's how it's coded. So it's the one and only time throughout this entire presentation that I have a legendary Pokemon be an ace or really on the team at all. But I think this is a reasonable exception. It doesn't ha it's not like it has 600 plus base stat total. It's like has 95 in every stat, which is okay. The player character can reasonably enough get around that. Yeah, and then the rest of the team is full of actually outside of Kamala and Silvally, there's no other overlapping types here. So we still have a flying bird, flying normal type, a psychic normal type, just like with Norman to help counteract fighting types. And then Beware is fun since it also kind of represents his mom, who also uses the Beware. So yeah, I think this is a very solid team. It was the last member for a while before everything came together, and it just makes so much sense for there to be a Dragon Elite Four member in Alola, with Ryuki here being the chosen character. And I don't blame you if you've never seen this guy in your life. He's a rather obscure character from those games. He in Sun and Moon, he was one of the one of the title defense people you fight sometimes. And then in Ultra Sun and Moon, he was the leader of a what they called a Cantonian gym, where it's basically Lieutenant Surge's gym's puzzle, and after you get through it, you fight him with the little team of dragon types. So I don't know, he's cool, I guess. But yeah, I think it only makes sense for him to kind of position himself into being an actual Elite Four member with Turtonator, Drampa, Flygon, Alolan Exeggutor, and Komao. Komao is the pseudo legendary Pokemon of the region, which is why it is a crying shame that that the fighting Elite Four member from Alola didn't actually use one. Like I understand that Komao was a totem Pokemon, and I guess they felt a little weird about using totem Pokemon on their teams, but you have a fighting Elite Four member, you have a fighting pseudo legendary. I feel it would have made sense for Hala to have a Coma O, but whatever. This is also part of the reason why I didn't have a grass specialist in here. At one point I had a grass specialist inside of Plumera, but Alolan Exeggutor just it just works so well on this team. And outside of Alolan Exeggutor, I think there's only two other new grass types, and that's just it just didn't quite come together for Sarina to be the ace anywhere here. But shout out to Sarina. I really like that Pokemon. It would have worked in something like Ultra Sun and Moon, where I think if uh instead of the Rock Trial Captain, you have or not Trial Captain, uh the Rock Kahuna, you have Mallow take over or something. I don't know. But regardless, I think the teams I came up with are overall pretty solid with Vikavolt, Salazzle, Sil Silvally, and Como. Again, Salazzle is technically on the weaker side, but uh, I don't think it's so weak that it massively brings down the average like Zatu did in Johto, like Bronzong does in Diamond and Pearl. I think it fits in well enough with the rest of them. Now, for Galar, this one was tricky because there were a lot of Galarian Pokemon that I really wanted to spotlight. However, There's also a lot of glaring Pokemon that I think are very good, but didn't get Gigantamax Pokemon. And with that being the whole gimmick, ideally I would have liked for all of the aces in Galar to have a Gigantamax form. But someone like, the pseudo legendary of the region was somehow not given a Gigantamax form, even though I really think it deserves some spotlight. So I was like, what do I do with that? So I decided to essentially create two different groups of Elite Fours. One where all of them use an ace that Gigantamaxes, and a group of four that don't use the gimmick. I think the first four is definitely like a more canon group, but then the second one, I actually kind of like the Pokemon I picked a little more. Just it's just unfortunate that the ace can't Gigantamax, but maybe they could be reworked slightly to have it be kind of like how I did in Kalos, where their ace didn't Mega Evolve, but they have a Pokemon that does. Maybe they could be reworked a little bit where a Pokemon on their team Gigantamaxes, but it's not their ace. I don't know. I might rework that a little bit in the future, but as of right now, the first group in Galar starts off with ground and this backpacker lady. There wasn't really a good ground specialist analog here. And she has Galarian Stunfisk, Hippowdon, Mamoswine, another one that I feel is represented more often as an ice type, so I wanted to show it off here as a ground type, Runerigus, and Sandaconda. Sandaconda is one of those weird Pokemon from Gen 8 that was given a G-Max form, and then no one ever used it. I don't know why they bothered doing stuff like that. Like that and Orbeetle, who I'll get to in just a second, like and Toxtricity for that matter. Like there's you fight so many aces of major characters that are previous gen Pokemon that got Gigantamax forms, and then you never actually see the new Gigantamax forms that are in the game. Like you could just create a random character to use this guy. They just kind of never did. So that was kind of my idea with these Elite Four characters here is I wanted to basically create a league where at least three of them can showcase the three Gigantamax forms that I listed that didn't get any love anywhere else in the game. So next up we have Electric. We have Pincurchin, Dracozolt, Arctozolt, Boltund, and Toxtricity in a Gigantamax form. With this little, Pikachu kid here. I don't know, he looks like he would probably have electric types. Yeah, outside of Pincurchin and Boltund, the other three don't have any type overlap. I think, and Pincurchin being able to set up the electric terrain, making Dracozolt and Arctozolt's signature move even better. Um, Yeah, I think this is just a very solid Elite Four team. Next up, Bug, and I decided to represent that with Clara here from the Isle of Armor DLC. She's typically a poison specialist, but I think you can rework her design just ever so slightly to make it instead of purple, make it pink all over. She already literally has like what looks like a Dustox on her head, even though Dustox isn't actually in the game. Um, yeah, I think you could rework her design just a little bit and make her an actual bug specialist. So, yeah, I think she works here. So I gave her Frostmoth, Araquanid, Rumbombi. Those two are mainly there just because I felt a little bad about not having a bug specialist in Alola. For the longest time, I had a bug specialist there, but then I decided to break it up and give Vikavolt to the electric guy, and Araquanid and Rambombi were on that team. So because I didn't use them there, I decided to put them here. Tinta Scorch and G-Max Orbeetle. Technically, Scorch is a slightly better Pokemon than Orbeetle. Orbeetle has 505 base dot total, Scorch has 515 base dot total. But in the mainline Sword and Shield game, we saw a trainer have Gmax Scorch. So even though I think that is probably an overall better Pokemon, it's even its Gmax move is better. Orbeetle can't really make super great use of gravity with its Gmax move, but I've always really liked Gmax Orbeetle. I like the typing of Bug Psychic quite a bit. I just think it fits her as a character a little better. So yeah, I just think this I really like her with Gmax Orbeetle. But if you're looking at this team and maybe you're like, oh, if it is actually Clara, maybe she should have a poison type on her team and also create another one instead of Rabombi, have to give her Scolipede. Um, yeah, I wanted to keep a Araquanid since Araquanid is theoretically good into both fire and rock. That can hinder the rest of the team. So wanted to keep Araquanid around for that, and then Scolipede, who I believe is only available in the Isle of Armor, which is where you first find her. So I think both teams work. I think Rabombi is maybe an overall better. For some reason, this just feels better as an overall team, but this feels better as a team for her, if that makes sense. And then lastly, we have Marnie as the Dark Specialist, with Obstagoon, Pangoro, Drapion, Morpeko, and Grimmsnarl in its Gigantamax form. I really like Grimmsnarl. I really like his Gigantamax form. I like the idea of her basically taking uh her brother's ace and making it on her team. I think Pangoro and Drapion also just fit her very well. So, and keeping her more Pico and Grimmsnarl, yeah, I think it works very well. It's definitely not vibe wise. I feel like it's not the strongest um last member I've created here, but I still think it makes for an overall pretty imposing team. At one point, I was kind of considering not doing any of the rivals since there's not like really an Elite Four in Galar, but there are a couple of characters you fight in a row that are kind of almost an Elite Four. But since they weren't Elite Four members, I decided to not worry about that and just I think Barney deserves it. You know, especially since in theory, it is the player character who is creating this new league. I think it's kind of fun to have the player give rival characters their you know positions in the Elite Four when applicable. So this is the first group here. Gmax, Sandaconda, Toxtricity, Orbeetle, Grimmsnarl. This is another one you can kind of mix it up a little bit. Electric and Bug, I think could go either way, but I do like Grimmsnarl being the the final ace. And now for group two, where we don't worry about Gigantamaxing, we're just focusing on which Pokemon from Galar work the best as aces. So first up, we have Normal. Now, this is definitely one that I think the team itself doesn't like fit the character itself the best, but I made the team first, and then I picked a character that I think worked best for the type. And I think the character from Galar that worked best for normal is your rival Hop. The first Pokemon he ever uses against you is a Wooloo. Dubwool is kind of a secondary ace for him for most of the game. He even adds a Snorlax at one point onto his team. So yeah, I think it only makes sense for him to then he can't quite become champion, not that he like wants to anymore, but you know when the player character becomes champion, you offer him a position in the Elite Four to now use normal types. So he keeps his double Greedent, who I don't like Greedent. Greedent's a top five least favorite Pokemon for me, but it is a normal type in the region, so I feel like I have to put it here. Heliolisk, just to add some type variety, and I hadn't used one yet, so might as well throw one on here. Indeedee male, not that it matters, but Indeedee male can hit just a little harder. And then Obstagoon as the ace. Again, I don't feel like Obstagoon like fits him the best, but it is definitely the best normal type in the region. So it you work with what you get. So I wasn't gonna have Dubwool be the ace. That's when there was a better option, I wasn't gonna do that. So Obstagoon can be the ace here. Next up, we have fighting with Bea, B, I think it's Bea. We have Grapploct, Toxicroak, Pangoro, just because I like Pangoro. I know I also use it on Marnie's team, but I I like Pangoro. Phalanx, and then Ace Surfetched. Surfetched should have always been her ace. I don't know why they gave her Machamp. She did not need Machamp as her ace. That will always bug me. Why would you create this brand new cool, evolution of a Galarian form of a Gen 1 Pokemon and then not have it be her ace? Yeah, it's on her team, but it's why isn't it more of a focus point? Will never understand. I'll never understand that. So yeah, I made her an Elite Four member and made Surfetch her ace. Next up, we have Ice with Melanie. We have Galarian Darmanitan, which can probably be the Zen mode one. I wasn't like I didn't want to like lock that in necessarily, but for just especially for type variety, we can say it can go Zen mode. Ice-Q, Arctivish. I feel slightly bad for Dracovish since that's the only one of the four that didn't get used, but I'm not like too worried about it. Frostmoth, which I've always gone on record saying absolutely should have gotten a Gigantamax form. Melanie is literally dressed like one. I feel like it it should have been positioned kind of as a counterpart to Centiskorch. And it just never got a G-Max form and they used Lapras instead. So whatever. And then Mr. Rime as the ace, a deceptively pretty powerful Pokemon from Galar that it's not honestly not like as strong as it maybe should be. Its special attack is I think only 10 higher than regular Mr. Mime, but it's a lot bulkier and then therefore it's a little harder to take down. I think is that's kind of what you want from an ace, especially in the Elite Four. So, and lastly, Ghost with Alistair, with Runerigus, Poltegeist, Delmise, Cursula, and just like with Bea, Cursula absolutely should have been his ace. Why do you have Gengar when you have an evolution of a Galarian Pokemon from a previous generation? It's the exact same thing. Cursula and Surfish are literally version exclusives. They are version exclusive trainers. Like it only makes sense for them to be the aces of their teams and have Gigantamax forms, and they didn't do that. So whatever. Cursor is kind of his pseudo ace, but it's not his actual ace because Dragapult honestly got kind of shafted in this generation. He's on Leon's team, but it's not even close to his ace. It absolutely should have gotten a Gigantamax form, like a just imagine, like a giant aircraft carrier, or just imagine like Dracloak just kind of like swarming around its head and like having things like taking off as like that just sounds awesome. But nope, it just didn't get anything. Oh well. But I'm making it the ace here because it's a it's a Pokemon that absolutely deserves to be to have a spotlight in this way. So there you go. And the second group of Galar Pokemon, we have Obstagoon, Sirfetch'd, Mr. Rime, and Dragapult. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Pretty solid group of aces there. Lastly, Paldea. This one was tough. Like I was juggling, I think, 9 different types at one point. There were up to 9 different Pokemon that absolutely deserve to be aces. Some of them ended up on other teams here, but there were several that I'm like, do I build a whole team around this guy or this guy? But like, if I did this guy, then this guy would have to be on that team, and would that be too strong? And then I have to make other teams a little stronger. Um, it ended up working out, and I think I'm happy with the individual teams I made. I'm definitely happy with the teams. I feel a little bad for certain other Pokemon. There are certain Pokemon on the teams that I think deserve to be actual aces, but we'll get to those. But I'm very happy with the aces I selected. I'm very happy with the overall team, but honestly, I'm still not even happy with the order that I put them in. I think all 4 of these teams could very easily be fought in any order and still and still like be a natural progression. Um, At one point, I even kind of considered having this be a choose your own order like in Unova, but I decided to just focus on the individual aces and rank them based on that. And I think I like what I ended up going with. So here we go. First member, we have Brassius, who is the grass specialist, with Arboliva, Toedscruel, Scovillain, Bramblegast, Hydrapple. And this is just the first one. At one point, like I said, he was last at one point, but it just worked out where he had to be first. Like this is a really, really good team. You have a lot of stuff going on. You have Arboliva potentially setting up Grassy Surge. You have Toedscruel, who can have almost guaranteed spores and toxics depending on the opponent. Scovillain can set up the sun and then outspeed and hit you with strong fire moves. Bramblegast is also there. Well, I'm kind of kidding, but it's a Pokemon that definitely I think represents Brassy as well. It's weird that it was never on any of his teams, even rematches. He was never there for some reason, but with its Wind Rider ability, it can be immune to pretty common grass threats like Air Slash, Hurricane, Heat Wave, Blizzard. Just a lot of a lot of things that grass is weak to are also wind moves, so they'll just, actually help Brambleghast instead. And then Hydrapple was a Pokemon introduced in the DLC that absolutely works as the ace of an Elite Four member. So yeah, this is a really good team, and I feel bad that he has to be number one, but I just it just kind of I don't know, it just kind of worked out that he is only first, but the other teams I think are equally, if not slightly more impressive. Speaking of which, Ghost. We have Rhyme here with Cerulege, Houndstone, Sinistra, again from the DLC, Annihilate, Gholdengo. So at one point, I had fire, fighting, and steel and ghost. Actually, I had like kind of all 4 of those at one point, kind of fighting for certain spots. Uh, so I had fire and fighting, especially for a while there. And I was like, well, Ghost also, like, Golden Go works well with both Ghost and Steel. Weren't quite enough Steel types to actually, they're already a Steel Elite Four member in Paldea, so just that should be Ghost. But then if there's Ghost, there's not enough Pokemon if you take away Annihilate and Cerulege. But Cerulege and Annihilate, I think absolutely both do deserve to be aces, but it just happened to work out that they're both on the team, but none of them are ace because Goldingo was just that good. It's deceptively fast. It hits really hard. Its ability is broken. It's just a good Pokemon. And then Houndstone and Sinistcha are just also both very good. And again, I like how there's no type overlap. It's man. And again, this is only second. Goldingo, I think represents the region very well. I think it would be a very solid final Elite Four ace. But yeah, I like both of these teams are spectacular, but they're not quite as good as the next two. And the next two are the two that I was definitely kind of flipping between towards the end. I guess I think I'm happy with my choice because of one little caveat, but I I like the teams overall, but I just man, there were a lot of hard choices I had to make with this one. So next up is water, and it's actually a double battle. So I really wanted the Dondozo and Tatsugiri interaction to happen, and there's no way for that to happen outside of a double battle. So we're throwing in double battles. You already have Rhyme in her gym battle be a double battle, so why can't an Elite Four member randomly be a double battle? So yeah, this team starts with Dondozo and Tatsugiri doing their thing, where Dondozo eats Tatsugiri and it's the orange one, so it gains an attack boost on top of his order up move, which makes him have a uh not rainbow boost, but it increases the attack, special attack, and speed, I think. So that's crazy. And then after you beat Dantozo, Tatsugiri is still there, and then he can send something else out. Ideally, he would send out Palafin next. It was I wasn't really sure how to like represent it here since Palafin is definitely his ace, but he would have to send it out earlier into the fight in order for it to use flip turn to switch out and come back in as Palafin hero form, which is part of the reason why I was a little apprehensive about making him the final Elite Four member, since there's a decent chance that if you're able to get around it, you're not actually going to fight his Palafin in his true form. Whereas the actual final ace that I picked is all the ways really good, whereas this Palafin is only really good half of the time. But still, Dondozo, I think, could also work just as well as an ace Pokemon. If this were earlier on, I didn't have Palafin as an option, Dondozo would absolutely work as as an ace, assuming it can get out on the same time as Tatsugiri. On top of that, you have Veluza, who, if it's allowed to set up with this fillet away ability or fillet away move, can boost all of his attacking stats and speed and also wreak havoc with that. And then Tauros is just a generally very good Pokemon. So yeah, that really does feel like Ace, final Elite Four member potential. However, I did already have Water as a previous final member. Um, Actually, I almost had it for two, but I didn't like it didn't quite work that way. But I don't know. I like this team a lot. I like these two teams a lot as well. But I think overall, the last team is the one that I personally feel like deserves to be the the final Elite Four member of Paldea. And that is Giacomo here with the Dark type with Mabostiff, Low Kicks, Bombardier, Overquill from the DLC, and King Gambit. Now, technically speaking, on paper, I believe this actually has the lowest average space stat total of the four. Or at the very least, Low Kicks and Bombardier kind of bring down the average slightly. But I think they all actually do. Every single Pokemon here is is doing something individually that really does help the team overall just absolutely shine. But Boston is deceptively really good. It has, I think, 120 base attack and pretty usable speed. It can have it has at least two different really good abilities with Intimidate and Stakeout. I believe it's Stakeout, where if you try to switch the Pokemon that you switch in on, if it uses an attack after you've switched, it'll deal double damage, or at least increased. I think if it's not double, it's 1.5 times to the switched in Pokemon, so that's bad. Intimidate is also really good. Even its ability Dark Guard Dog, which I remember it doesn't get affected by Intimidate. I remember exactly what else it does. Maybe it can't be switched out or something, but all three of his abilities are pretty good, but definitely Intimidate and Stakeout are both really good. Um, Low kicks is also deceptively pretty strong, especially if it had its tinted lens ability, which, like I said, I'm very okay with Elite Four members using hidden abilities. Has priority Sucker Punch and First Impression. It's hitting pretty much everything neutrally with those. It has its Axe Kick move, which it can hit uh, a number of things super effectively with that. It can have it can use U-turn. It's actually quite a bit faster than you might think and hit a little harder than you think. It could set up swords dances. Like if you're like not exactly prepared for it, it can actually do some decent damage to you. Now, the Bombardier, with it being flying type, that makes it good into fighting types. With its rocky payload ability, it gives it essentially stab with rock moves, which can just kind of help overall. That can be good into both ice, who's usually good in Bombardier, and then other bug types, which the rest of the team can kind of struggle with. So Bombardier is also, flying is also great into that. Overquill. At one point, this was Crocodile, but I've never really had an opportunity to use Overquill on many teams before. So Overquill, because why not? It's only weak to one type, that being ground. Um, so yeah, that's cool. It also has three really good abilities: Poison Point, Swift Swim, and Intimidate. Any one of those could work here. Especially if it does have other. I think it can set up Rain Dance. If it can't set up its own Rain Dance, then definitely one of the other two. But it can definitely use water moves to hit the ground type that it is otherwise weak to. And then King Gambit is the Pokemon that I said technically I believe is on average overall a little better than Palafin. Um, Once Palafin is able to switch out and then switch back in with its hero form, it is technically going to be dealing more damage with its higher attack stat and definitely higher speed. But if King Gambit comes out last and it tears into a dark type, its its priority move, Sucker Punch, will be on average, I believe, a little stronger than Terra boosted Jet Punch from Palafin because Sucker Punch already does a little more damage. King Gambit will have that +5 multiplier, however they calculate that in game with the Supreme Overlord ability. On top of the Terrestrialization enhancement, like yeah, that's really good. On top of its other it's just other coverage moves, Iron Head to counter any fairy moves. Like, yeah, I think I like King Gambit being the ace. I feel like it represents the region very well. Um, it having that Supreme Overlord ability, just enhancing every single move it can use. Yeah, I think I'm happy with this. I'm definitely happy with this group of aces. Hydrapple, Goldango, Palafin, Hero Form, King Gambit. This might be the single strongest group of aces I've created throughout this entire presentation. There's others that vibe-wise got really close at least, but just sheer strength, I do think this is honestly kind of deceptively the highest because Goldingo doesn't really look like it would be that strong, but it is. Same with Hydrapple. It's really strong. So yeah, there you go. Um, Again, I could easily see any or all of these being in any position. So this is just a very, very good league. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought about any of these teams here. Are there any that you just massively disagree with? Are there any orderings that you disagree with? Are there any Pokemon or types or characters you felt I forgot about? What are there any do you have any ideas of your own for any given region's Elite Fours? Like I really like having those kinds of discussions. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed making this video and I hope to continue making videos like it in the future. But until then, I'll see you all next time.